welcome to the Astrology Channel. This is our first daily/weekly horoscope. It's a weekly video where we go through the days of the week. This comes from both an initiative that I had on my own astrology space, and Kyle actually turns out that did the same thing, and we just didn't know. And so now we're just combining forces to bring you planetary day horoscopes, which is something that I haven't really seen around much, but yes, before we get into it, Kyle, do you have anything to say about why you started doing planetary date horoscopes before, and also like maybe why you stopped and why you wanted to restart it again?
I started because I started when I was getting really into doing like daily astrological remediation for myself, and a lot of those practices center around like the day ruler, the planet associated with that day. Then you can try to tailor activities around the planetary hours as well. But just like knowing what was going on with that planet on that day was a big part of working with that planet. The mic gets passed to it on that day,
Yeah.
so it had a little more to say. So yeah, the reason I didn't keep doing it is because it was a lot of work. It was too much
Yes,
for
I get
for
that.
me, and then it was all gone. Like it was not useful again. When I think about it, how much I learned from going back and listening to like forecasts and horoscopes when I was learning astrology, I think there's still always value.
For sure. Yeah, and that was also a similar reason why I started doing my planetary day horoscopes, because the planetary day horoscopes for me were the remediation itself, because I have my little daily planetary thing at the beginning of every day, and it was really nice to have my little morning ritual, and right after that, kind of like touching base on like the image, because as you guys are gonna see, I have an image for each of the days, and that was central to my daily horoscopes. Just having an image to kind of meditate on and sit with for the day was really nice, and that's kind of what I'm hoping people get out of this too, just by having the images and like a very quick touch point on the transits of the planets that rules the day feels really important to me, even from like you said, from a remediation standpoint, but also from like a didactic standpoint, where you get to learn like what sorts of things do you need to pay attention to whenever you're dealing with the planet that rules the day or anything along those lines.
And like when to pay attention to those things, like when to
Yes.
pay attention.
All right, cool. So we're starting the week on July 1st. It's really nice because we actually get to start at the beginning of the month. And here, of course, we have a moon day since it is a Monday. And we're looking at the moon in Taurus. She is exalted in her own decan. Taurus is an earth sign, which is one of the moon's elements, so she's also in her own element. She is currently in Mercury's terms and carrying a sextile from the sun towards a conjunction to Mars. And then following that, she will also hang out with Venus. The moon is always busy. Um, do you have anything to say about this particular day, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean it's funny how much of a mixed bag that is for the moon because it's in Taurus, it's super happy, it's applying to a sextile with Venus, so there's like a mutual reception between Venus and Cancer, the moon and Taurus. That's like pretty, uh, cotton candy and bubble gum. Like it's nice, but it's also conjunct Mars and hanging out with Uranus. So it's got like a lot of destabilizing things to deal with at home or like where it is, and it to me seems like being very well situated to sort of clean up like the mess from like the last week or so, sort of like kind of pull yourself together, sort of gracefully dealing with problems kind of day.
Yeah, I feel that too. And I think that this whole moon Mars situation is probably something that may be a little challenging for the moon, but actually really helpful for Mars. So like moon and the moon people, so like your Cancer risings or people with like the moon really prominent in their chart or whatever. But I don't know, to me it almost felt like this call to action for the moon. Like usually Taurus is like this place where the moon's exalted and she just gets to like lounge around and eat really nice food. But then now there's Mars, and we have to kind of tend to that angry boy over there before we actually get to enjoy any of those things. And that's kind of what I was playing with the image for the day. Also, just the moon sitting in a throne, really nice, have on like a really nice day out. But then there's this crazy ball behind her, and she has to do something about that before it does something about her.
I think actually the image is really good because exalted planets can have that sort of high expectation. They can seem kind of entitled at times, but they sort of need a problem to deal with
Yes.
because they're actually really good at dealing with the issues of that planet. But they need to have an issue to deal with, and it's helpful to only have one problem to deal with at a time. If you have like a whole mess of problems, that's kind of the difference between maybe an exalted planet and a not exalted planet.
Yeah.
It's that it's so well situated that it can actually deal with problems as they come up.
Cool. So on a scale from 1 to 5, what would you say is how difficult is this day for or moon people out there?
It is Moon Mars, but I'm gonna say it is a good 4 in difficult, but like a 5 in terms of ability to deal with it.
Tackle it. Oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. I like that. All right, so let's move on to Tuesday. We talked about Mars, and now we're into Mars Day. Mars is, of course, in Taurus, like we've been talking about, which is Mars' detriment. Taurus is an Earth sign, though, so Mars is in his own element because Mars really likes the Earth and water signs. Mars is also in the moon's decan and in Jupiter's terms, and it's moving towards a sextile to Saturn, which Saturn is also moving towards that sextile because Saturn is retrograde, which we call a mutual application. With this particular day, I was really kind of feeling into the dryness of it all because Mars is already a naturally dry planet, Taurus is a dry sign, and Saturn also is dry, and having that Mars Saturn sextile I feel like really exacerbates some of those qualities. Also, Saturn is cold in a cold sign, and Mars is a little cold as well in Earth signs. So I think it's this. Even though it's a Mars day, it can have this sort of like really cooling and dry effect, which in the image I really wanted to show like this guy's just kind of like giving up. Like
Mhm.
he's tried his best, but he's just like not having it. And I think that the way that I was seeing it, I was seeing that as more of a positive rather than a negative. Just like that moment of like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not gonna do it. Like I've been trying for all this time and nothing is working out. I know that I still have to figure this thing out, but today I cannot. And just being like able to even say that to yourself and just be like, you know what, I'll do that some other day, was the vibe that I was tapping into with this. What do you feel about this Mars Day?
Yeah, actually, I love the image. It's pretty on point. I feel like there's like I don't want to farm today. Like this is not what I'm into right now. It's Mars and Taurus. Like Mars doesn't really like it in Taurus, though. Mars has triplicity in Taurus, so like there's soldiers can be good farmers, right?
Yeah.
They don't necessarily love it, but they get to do something with the energy.
Hmm.
And I think that's like what I think about is how sometimes it feels like we don't have the energy to do things, but sometimes it's just that we don't get to do the thing that we want.
Yeah.
And so it feels draining or just generally bums us out. So it's just kind of like that. I don't want to deal with this today. But it's kind of like while Mars like isn't in love with where it's at, it's supported. It's just supported by lots of like Venus moon stuff. The crops are growing, the farm is prosperous. You got a little bit of work to do, but then otherwise, like, go fuck off, do your thing, like chill
Yeah.
out.
Because I think that
Not
that's
that
the
much.
Moon Venus thing. It's like just hanging out for a second.
Yeah, yeah. Accepting that there's not that much to be done right now.
Cool. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how hard is the day? And on a scale of 1 to 5, how easy it is to actually tend to some of those difficulties.
Oh god. Uh, it's funny because Mars sort of flips it on its head, where the only problem is that there isn't a problem. Um,
Oh, I
it's
get that.
want to make it a problem, yeah.
Yes. So maybe on a scale of 1 to 5, it's like a 2 in difficulty, but then it's probably like 1 in how easy it is to actually deal with those tiny difficulties. You're just
Yeah.
making more and more problems for yourself. You're
Yeah.
looking for something to do.
Hmm.
Oh, cool. I love that.
That's yeah.
All right, so moving on to Wednesday, Mercury's day. Mercury has just entered Leo, which is the best sign for Mercury to be in, as far as I know. And Mercury in Leo is peregrine. It's in Saturn's decan and in Jupiter's terms, and is moving towards a sextile to Jupiter. It actually feels really nice. What do you feel about this day?
I don't hate it. It's not too bad. I like Mercury in general in fire signs over water signs. Not that I actually kind of love Mercury in Scorpio and kind of love it in Cancer too. And actually, I really like it in Pisces. It's just not very easy for Mercury. So I think there's kind of it just got into Leo. It doesn't get a ton of dignity, but it gets like out of the mud or out of the water
Yeah.
into like a drier environment, which Mercury I think definitely appreciates.
And it's
But it,
interesting because Mercury is currently out of sectum because Mercury is an evening star right now.
Mhm.
So I think even hearing you say about like the Mercury and water signs and some of those good qualities, maybe we got to experience that in the previous days, but now like shifting into the fire thing, it's like, oh my God, now I have to present, I have to talk about this thing, I have to convince somebody that this is the place to go. But then Mercury is like an evening star and really more so in that internal, like I just wanna like learn about the thing. I don't need to talk about
Yeah.
it. But in Leo you kind of have to, and I think that might be the one challenge that I see for the day. But that sextile to Jupiter looks really nice and supportive, especially with Mercury and Jupiter's own turns.
Oh
Feels like a
yeah.
nice handshake.
Yeah, they're working together for sure. Yeah, I think the pressure to perform planets in Leo always have that like how does this look? Not in like a superficial way, but
Yeah.
like aware of like how things have impact, how they appear, and like the need to maintain appearances.
Yeah.
This to me looks like used well, like it's a good time to kind of format a project to almost like focus more on how a thing is going to be presented rather than what it is you're presenting. The details aren't necessarily there for Mercury quite yet, but the like ability to like make it look good is.
I hear that. And I think that that's also what I was playing with when I decided on this image. Like, yes, there's a little bit of that tension, but it seems like whatever it is that Mercury is delivering um, has an audience. You know, there's people are willing to listen, even if it is a little fumbly and nervous. People are like there for you. I think that that's really good for the Mercury people out and about in this world.
You can have a lot to say, but if you have no idea how to present it, like nobody will want to listen. But if
Yes.
you only have a few things to say, but you can make it like sound good and look good, like you're there, you're golden, you're good.
Yeah. I think maybe even playing on the Mercury and the fixed sign is like just sticking to what works. Like, yes, you're nervous, then don't play around with all the Jupiter and Gemini ideas. Just like
Yeah.
go with the one that you've already rehearsed and done the thing. You know that it worked before, so probably just do it that again, and people will be
Mhm.
just happy with that. Cool. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how difficult is this day? And on a scale of 1 to 5, how easy it is to actually tend to those difficulties?
I'm gonna give it a good like middle of the road 3-3. You know,
Yeah, it's like
uh,
the nice window in the week. Actually, I feel like this Wednesday and Thursday is probably like the as easy as it gets this week.
mhm.
Um, Well, cool.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Thursday. So Thursday's Jupiter's day, and Jupiter's currently in detriment in his own element, in his own decan, and also in his own turn, and also about to receive that sextile from Mercury. So in many ways, we can say that Wednesday and Thursday are kind of like two sides of the same story. Mercury initiates it, and then Jupiter kind of like takes it over. What are you feeling about this Thursday? To me, it feels really good.
Yeah. This is it's like you have the template laid out yesterday, but now you actually like, oh, I know what I can fill it in with.
Yes.
I have all the details that I can fill it in with. And the nice thing about templates is that they sort of like having a container for something gives it sort of a maximum fill line.
Hmm.
So you can kind of fill it in without too much worry about it being too chaotic or disorganized or just saying too much.
And I think that that's probably like the gift of today, like being able to parse out through all of those, through the massive information or through the massive possibilities, all the things that you could do, or all the things that you could learn about, or the things that you could be speaking about, and just finding like that that one thing that really works. That's how I was seeing the Jupiter Mercury sextile, because this is Mercury receiving Jupiter in Gemini, which is where Jupiter will be in for like the next year in a little bit. And this is kind of
Mhm.
like that the nicest moment of that Jupiter in Gemini journey, because as we can see, Jupiter's in his own decan, his own terms, his own element. It's really as Jupiter as it can get in Gemini, and yeah, that's really what I was going with the image as well. Like just this guy who's been able to find the book that they were looking for, and just really been able to sort through all the mess and finally find a moment of I don't think stasis is really the word. Maybe stasis can be the word because Mercury is in a fixed sign, but I think we've been playing with this word, but I think that that's really it. Like really finding more so the template in which we can put all of those random things through to
Mm.
find the cohesion, and maybe Jupiter will be tempted to deviate from that template as time goes on in this year of Jupiter and Gemini. But at least we know, at least we found what that template is. That's kind of how I was
Yeah.
seeing this.
I think what could be useful about the way Mercury would focus Jupiter from Leo is that, like, well, this is the part that people are actually going to read. Like, this is the part that
Ooh,
people are actually going to see. We don't need to like fill it with a bunch of background detail. Like, just this part. I'm also just noticing too that the Venus Jupiter Antisha is going exact on Thursday,
oh
which
wow,
uh,
yeah.
is quite nice for Jupiter, and for Venus, really. But they're both in Jupiter's terms, actually, Venus and Jupiter.
Oh,
Uh,
neighbors,
yeah.
nice.
But in case you didn't know what Antisha was, I know you do, Joji, but
Yeah, for the people watching.
yeah, basically Venus was it Thursday morning. Venus is at 21 Cancer, and Jupiter is at 8 and like 57 minutes Gemini. So basically, they're both about 21 degrees from the solstice point, from the Gemini
Hmm.
Cancer cusp. And basically, that's an Antisha. Like,
Yeah,
there are points in the sky that have equal daylight to each other. So
yeah.
they're, some say, a secret conjunction.
Yeah, I've also
I would
heard like a
say,
conjunction in time as opposed to a conjunction in space, which I really like that too.
yeah, I've always tried to find a good metaphor for it because I don't think it's exactly conjunction, but
Yeah.
almost like a deja vu moment, or
Yeah.
something like, oh, I had this thought, you know, 3 weeks ago, and it's actually super relevant right now.
Yeah.
Maybe, and it wasn't then.
I'll also always think of it as like maybe like a mirror, like where they're just like from this the perfect angle you can actually see Venus from this sign where you don't actually usually see her, but there's like from the corner of your eye you can kind of like get it. You feel how the situation is from over there. And I think also to the Andisha thing, it's really nice that Venus in Cancer is actually in Jupiter's exaltation sign. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that also contributes to the the vibe of the day. Can really have this sort of benefic flavor of like, oh my god, like I found the thing. Now I am able to do that other thing. Or
Yeah.
like I found the person. We can work on this together. Great. Those sorts of moments, I think. So, on a scale from 1 to 5, how difficult the day is, I'm feeling a 1 on this day. I don't know about you. I feel like it's the easiest day of the week.
Yeah. It's not very difficult.
Yeah. And I think
I,
on the ease scale to deal with the day, probably also a max 5. Because it's just use this day wisely, is what we're saying.
yeah.
Um, Cool. So let's move on to Friday, Venus's day. We already talked a little bit about Venus. It's nice to have that nice segue. So over here we have Venus in Cancer in her own element because Venus likes water and earth signs. She's in the moon's decan and in Jupiter's terms. So like a very benefic flavor continued over here. But she is moving from sextile to Mars to Saturn trine, which Saturn, like we said, is retrograde, so this is also a mutual application. Yeah, so this day is interesting. When I was making all the images for the days, I think this was the one day that I felt like what was the most interesting, because the image itself kind of looks challenging. It kind of looks like it's something that you don't want to live through. But the way that I was interpreting the day is actually more towards the positive side of things. I think that, like, yes, she's teary and she's like having some nice snacks and just having like a bit of a moment. But I saw this as more so being able to actually let go of some of these emotions and process them through a good snack and cry fest, rather than just crying because you know things are going to be tough. It's more so like, this is this thing is over and I'm crying because I'm grieving, but I know that like the future is bright, or there's like things to look forward to, or you made a really tough decision and you kind of feel sad about it, but at the same time, you know that that was the right thing to do, especially in the realm of relationships. I think with Venus, especially Venus in Cancer, can bring a lot of that sort of flavor. But yeah, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I would say that's about the vibe. Venus has been pretty tightly configured to both Mars and Saturn like all week. And then kind of going on in the background all week as well is the moon is really being wrung out. Like it's Friday is the day of the new moon, which rules things in Cancer. And it's just generally going to like give the time a flavor, whatever the phase of the moon is. But Venus is separating from these aspects with Mars and Saturn, and both Mars and Saturn don't have a lot to work with where they are. Mars is in Taurus, which Venus rules. Saturn's in Pisces, which Venus exalts in. So Venus has a lot to offer them, and while it's their trines and sextiles, it's still a lot is being asked of Venus, and she's like finally starting to move away. She's also like just getting out from under the beams or from combustion.
Yeah.
She's still under the beams, but she's, what is that? At about 8 degrees away from the sun. Like just kind of out of like the real hot zone. So she's been through a lot, and she's moving on to a nicer place, but she has to kind of wring out those feelings and maybe still tie up loose ends.
Yeah. I think that that's the thing that Venus can provide to those Mars and Saturn people in the world, is that sort of like a good grief. It's like the nice soothing balm to allow us to grieve, and in a nice way, not in a way where we're mad about the situation, more so with this understanding like, oh, this really is all for the best. I'll
Yeah.
still cry about it, but it is all for the best.
Yeah. I mean, I think there could also be for some people too, like, oh, I finally get to enjoy myself now. Like I finally
Oh
get to
yeah.
oh, it's really over, or oh, I really dealt with those things, and like it actually is kind of smooth sailing now, and like I can like start to breathe a sigh of relief, which sometimes comes with tears.
Yeah.
It's like I
And
can't believe it's
to
over.
that, actually, I think that that's a good way to see that transition of Venus and Cancer to Venus and Leo, because then you go from like, maybe I've been this person facilitating the grieving process for these Saturn and Mars people, but then once Venus is in Leo, it's like, okay, now that that's done with, I can just think about myself. Maybe a little bit too much, but still well deserved. And to that, I think that on a scale of 1 to 5, the difficulty is probably like a 4, because it's a lot of emotions. But I feel like the ease of dealing with them is probably a 5. So it's like, yes, it's difficult, but it's also easy to deal with if you just like allow yourself to be in that space.
I'm thinking that it's harder for water people, um,
Yes.
than it is. If you are already inclined towards having lots of emotions, then it's going to be harder, but still nice. Oh, it was hard today, but then we went to the park, and you know,
Like we
the
cooked a
dogs.
nice meal together,
Yeah,
and it was good.
yeah. But I think for some people too, like maybe more choleric types, they'll be like, oh yeah, like
Well, finally.
oh yeah, now let's go to the water park.
Yeah, cool. All right, so we're almost at the end of the week. Here is Saturn Day, and Saturn is currently in Pisces, where he is a peregrine, or where she is peregrine. I'm more of a she Saturn than a he Saturn. Saturn is also retrograde, and Jupiter's decan, and Mars's terms, and also finally completing that sextile to Mars. have some thoughts about this day, but I'd love to hear you first, Kyle. Like, what you, how are you feeling about this Saturday?
I feel like this is very like a stoic acceptance that there's nothing for me to like grind my axe on today. It could almost be like I really want to work today, but I'm actually on vacation right now. But like kind of feel like I like want
Only Saturn, whatever.
yeah. This is the the pain of being on vacation, but full of
I
so
love
much
that.
vinegar.
Oh man. But I actually I love that so much because it's kind of like that feeling where you have a bunch of stuff to do and they're really like it's really troubling you, but then you're in this resort in the middle of the fucking like Pacific Ocean and you're just like, ah shit, I guess I just have to
Yeah.
enjoy myself.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, maybe there is stuff to do, but like you're not in the place to do it right now.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can fret about it and like stress yourself out about it and like use it as the excuse to ruin your time. I always think of Saturdays as they're Saturn days, which can be a day of leisure as long as you've like met
Yeah.
Saturn's standard. If you've done your work for the week, then Saturn lets you chill. But if not, then you know, woe and anxiety for you.
Yeah. I think also another word for the day is boredom. I
Yeah.
that I also see, and I think that that's what I was kind of playing with the most with the image. I just want to kind of this old lady just watching the ripples in the ocean and being like, "Fuck, I want to get out of here. Just can't." Uh, and yeah, I don't know. What do you feel like on a scale of 1 to 5? How difficult is the day?
I don't think it's an inherently super difficult day.
Yeah.
It does have like a pensive vibe to it. I like the image that you used because especially Saturn in Pisces, water signs in general, there's this kind of holding on to like old emotions or holding oneself accountable for things that aren't that haven't been yet or that you like sort of imagine was other people's experience but you don't actually know. It could be a lot of like rumination
Yeah.
or we're freshly retrograde Saturn, like reflecting on the past, that could be productive, but could also be just sort of throwing a wet blanket on things when it's not really necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like today is probably like a mid-tier difficulty, but also very easy for you to make it more difficult for yourself. Especially if you're not okay with boredom or you're not okay with just like chillaxing and letting the problems just kind of fizzle out until you're actually able to tend to them. I think it's one of those days where it's really easy to ruminate, like you're saying, and just like be in that heavy space. But if you're willing to not be, I think a way out, especially with this Venus and Cancer are sort of still trying to Saturn and the Mars sextile and all those things.
Yeah, yeah. The time for dealing with things will come. We're not at action time yet. So
Yes.
maybe relaxing, like taking care of yourself, taking time to like recover is also a responsibility.
Yeah.
And, you know, dutifully resting.
Cool. Awesome. So finally, on to the last day of the week. This is, of course, Sunday, and the sun is still in Cancer. It is out of his element because the sun is a bit of a fiend for fire and nothing else. And the sun is also in Mercury's decan in terms and is moving towards trying to Saturn. Saturn is really getting all the attention this week. Saturn and Mars. It's a malefic week, but with all these very nice and comfortable aspects. It's very interesting. But yeah, I think the thing that I was playing with the most was the Decan and the whole Mercury thing that the sun is in. Because Mercury and the sun are kind of like exchanging favors in a way because the sun is in Mercury's decan, also Mercury's terms, while Mercury is in the sun's own sign. They're not able to witness each other, but I think at the same time, just that sort of exchange of vibes is something to consider. And the way that I was playing with that is really this idea of like having really important conversations, but having also the safe space to have those conversations. But it is a trine to Saturn, and we're still dealing with those mutual applications to Saturn because Saturn is retrograde. So I feel like despite it being the safe space to have those conversations, the conversations in and of themselves are still difficult and a little awkward. They're like things that we'd rather not talk about, but there's this sort of recognition that now is the time to actually tend to them. And I think that the way that I saw the trying to Saturn and this mutual application is more so like the ability to maybe recognize each other's fault in an issue, especially with the sun in Cancer, like such a familial sign, can also even be like actually tending to family issues and things like that. So like before we started recording this, we kind of talked about the family trauma where somebody was a shitty parent, but then that shitty parent had a shitty parent who had a shitty parent and who had a shitty parent. And I feel like this shrine, it's kind of like that moment of recognition. They're like, yeah, maybe we're shitty to each other. Maybe we all kind of fuck with each other every now and then, but we all kind of do it. So it's okay. Like we can get through this. Um, yeah, that's
Yeah,
kind of how I was feeling into this.
I like that a lot, actually. I know we weren't going to talk about fixed stars too much, but it's moving away from Sirius right now. But as we'll perhaps discuss in a future video, Sirius, one of its fixed star series, one of its uses for magical purposes is like the reconciliation of princes or like between princes. There's a peacemaking potential for the star. And especially with like authority figures. And I think you get a lot of that with Sun, Saturn stuff. And I can see that kind of taking place between like parents and children for sure. And maybe even like on a broader level, the moon will be ruling the sun is going to be opposed Pluto in the morning. Then it'll move on. But this kind of tendency that we all have to like want to look to the authority to place responsibility on them. Like the one in charge is supposed to know what they're doing, but there's maybe a potential to realize that like, oh, maybe they don't always know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't either. And maybe we can sort of forgive each other for that, for not always knowing what we're doing. That being a sort of basis for the rebuilding of a relationship.
Yeah. And I don't feel like today is also a very difficult day at that. Like maybe we're dealing with difficult topics, but it feels like an easier day rather than anything else. I feel like maybe we're dealing with like a 2 in difficulty, or like a 5 in like agency.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, this could be very much like recognizing like what power you do have and just kind of working with that and like not necessarily holding yourself to strictly to like an ideal of
Yeah.
like what I should be capable of or like what I should be able to do or who I should be. Like this is who I am today. This is what I have to offer. This is what I can do. And like that's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not even that bad. You know?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's terrible, you know.
Oh my god. Well, cool. So that is the week. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions or comments or anything at all, you can, of course, leave it in the comments below. We're here for that. And if you want to figure out what all this means in your actual natal chart, Kyle and I both are practicing astrologers. You can book a reading with me at themercuryrising.com and with Kyle at
KylePierceAstrologer.com.
yeah, we'd love to talk about any of these days if you're curious about them. But with that, that is it for today. Thank you for watching the Astrology Channel one more time. And I'm really excited to get started on these horoscopes. When we first started the channel, we said we would not be doing horoscopes, but I'm glad that we are because it's actually a lot of fun. All right, guys, I will see you next week with another weekly horoscope and very soon with another video, which we're already kind of teased what the topic will be, but I'll leave that for you guys to rewatch the video and figure out what that video might be. But all right, I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.